Today, we announce the unsealing of sex trafficking charges against Giuffre Epstien. The charges allege that Epstein abused young girls by enticing them to engage in sex for money. Epstein was arrested this past Saturday evening at Teterboro Airport aboard his private jet that had just landed from Paris, France. Epstein was taken to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. Epstein is charged in a 2-count indictment. First, conspiracy to commit sex trafficking, and second, the substantive crime of sex trafficking of underage girls. Beginning in at least 2002 and continuing until 2005, Epstein is alleged to have abused dozens of victims by causing them to engage in sex acts with him at his mansion in New York and at his estate in Palm Beach, Florida. The victims, all underage at the time of the alleged conduct, were given hundreds of dollars in cash after each encounter, either by Epstein or by one of Epstein's employees. The underage girls were initially recruited to provide Epstein with massages and often did so nude or partially nude.
You shot straight, but you shot late. High level. This is the Rundown Podcast.
I'm going to give you the rundown.
Using the Giuffre Epstein case, tonight the release of previously sealed court documents, including the names of people linked in some way to convicted offender Giuffre Epstein, including former presidents Clinton and Trump, magician David Copperfield, Michael Jackson, among the many names. None accused of wrongdoing, but what the documents do claim, with more documents released just moments ago. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, newly unsealed court documents offer a who's who of people name-dropped in connection with Giuffre Epstein, the notorious offender who had himself in jail while awaiting trial. Some had known associations with Epstein, like the actor Kevin Spacey, the magician David Copperfield, supermodel Naomi Campbell, and former presidents Trump and Clinton. None was accused of wrongdoing. Most of the names were contained in a May 2016 deposition of Johanna Schoberg, who worked for and traveled with Epstein for several years. She said she was flying to Atlantic City with Epstein when Giuffre said, "Great, we'll call up Trump." There's no evidence in the documents that call ever took place. Schoberg identified Copperfield as a friend of Epstein's and was asked, "Did Copperfield ever discuss Giuffre's involvement with young girls with you?" She answered, "He questioned me if I was aware that girls were getting paid to find other girls. Did he tell you any of the specifics of that? No." Some of the famous names seem to come out of the blue, like Michael Jackson, who Schoberg claims she met at Epstein's Palm Beach home. Schoberg was asked, "Did you massage him?" She answered, "I did not." The documents were part of a long-settled defamation lawsuit alleged victim Virginia Giuffre brought against Epstein's former companion Ghislaine Maxwell.
It's really important to the public interest to be able to see those documents that have been held for so long in the court file.
Giuffre made allegations claiming Maxwell and Epstein directed her to have sex with powerful men like former Senator George Mitchell, former Ambassador Bill Richardson, Hyatt Hotel Chairman Tom Pritzker, and on 3 occasions with Prince Andrew. All of the men have denied it. Prince Andrew settled a lawsuit with Giuffre in 2022.
We're now starting to see the information behind the trafficking scheme.
Johanna Schoberg said in her deposition she was on a couch with Giuffre, Prince Andrew, Maxwell, and Epstein at his Upper East Side mansion when Andrew put his hand on my and they took a photo. That photo has never surfaced. No comment tonight from Prince Andrew.
Arguably one of the most suspicious, mysterious, and we're still left in suspense when it comes to this case of Giuffre Epstein. We now have conspiracy theories that have circulated since Epstein's death, claiming that he was killed by someone afraid he would expose sex crimes of prominent figures in politics and finance whose friendship he had cultivated over several decades. Slide with me as me, OG Jucario, your host, takes you down the rabbit hole of Giuffre Epstein and all the cover-ups, and all the way up until the footage released of Giuffre Epstein, his last moments seen before he allegedly inflicted harm to himself in his jail cell. Now, since the release of this surveillance video of the Metropolitan Detention Center where Epstein was housed at, there have been many questions about a minute that's missing on that video, and if the Trump administration is being so transparent. Why is the video edited? Okay? I thought they were going to show the video in its entirety. But as we see, this 1 minute that's actually missing from this video, a minute and a couple of seconds, right? That's all you need to escape up out of there, or two, for somebody to come in and possibly do something to Epstein. And that would lead up to him not inflicting this harm to himself. Maybe somebody else did it, and that's what a lot of people believe, okay? Because like his brother said, why would Epstein take himself out before his bail hearing? That doesn't make any sense. And by the end of this segment, you'll have a clearer understanding, maybe as to why they didn't release all those files like Pam Bondi expected them to, right? And we'll possibly see that this beef, this ongoing back and forth with Elon Musk, this falling out with him and Trump, all comes into play. Because Elon Musk already told us, hey, they're not releasing all the files because Donald J. Trump, your president, is in those files, along with many others. So slide with me, because by the time we finish this, you'll definitely understand why we're all being lied to. Now, what caused a lot of this confusion is when Fox News interviewed Pam Bondi, and they asked her, hey, will the Epstein client list really be released? And she said that it's sitting on my desk right now, right? Waiting on her review. And this right here insinuated to a lot of people that it was indeed a client list.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
But then, they come back and they, clean up their mess and say, hey, there was no client list. She didn't mean that the client list itself was sitting on the desk. No, she's talking about the entirety of the case and all the files. Wow, really?
She was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that.
Maureen Comey, the prosecutor in Ghislaine Maxwell's federal case, right? Her father, James Comey, said some of those files in the Epstein case were missing. Now, Pam Bondi followed up by saying that, insinuating, right? Acting as if, the files weren't missing. And she had to call him to verify. Well, why you got to call him to verify it if they weren't missing?
James Comer said yesterday that all the Epstein files are missing. We still haven't heard from you.
No, the FBI, the FBI, they're reviewing, there are tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child, and there are hundreds of victims. And no one victim will ever get released. It's just the volume, and that's what they're going through right now. The FBI is diligently going through that. I haven't seen that statement, but I'll call him later and find out.
So that's how we know that, some of the files indeed, in fact, were. And then she comes back and she has to demand the FBI field office department there in New York to release those files that they had once she found out that they had the files. So that lets us know right there, they were already covering up. Now, when the FBI gave her the same files that were already public, that's right, they gave Bondi in the Trump administration public information that was already available, nothing new. And then she accused the FBI field office there in New York of hiding documents, okay, from the public. And she demanded that the rest of the documents be released by a certain date.
I gave them a deadline of Friday at 8 a.m. to get us everything, and a source had told me where the documents were being kept, Southern District of New York, shock. So we got them all by, hopefully all of them, Friday at 8 a.m., thousands of pages of documents. I have the FBI going through them, and Cash is also, now that we have Cash here, it's a game changer, of course, and Cash is going to, Director Patel, is going to get us a detailed report as to why the FBI withheld all of those documents.
Now, of course, heads had to roll, and somebody had to be fired for this, because once Bondi put Cash Patel, the FBI director, on the case, She demanded that Patel get her answers as to why all the files wasn't given to the administration. And guess what? Yes, that New York FBI director there over that field was fired because he was withholding this information there in New York. And this right here is a clear example of how corruption works. Now ask yourself this question. Why was the head of the FBI there in New York at that field office withholding those files on Epstein? There's not so many, possibilities out there that as to why he would do this, right? Maybe he was doing it because he was connected to Epstein, allegedly. Was paid off, possibly, okay? And maybe he was connected to a lot of those politicians, okay, that were on some of those tapes and some of that documentation that had not been released that he was holding on to. It's only so many things as to why he didn't release it.
There is more coming on the Epstein files. Listen, I know this is a hot potato for folks. I totally understand. My comments were clear. I'm not paid for my opinions anymore. I work for the taxpayer now. I'm paid on evidence. That's it. The evidence we have in our files clearly indicates that it was, in fact, we do have video. It's not the greatest video in the world. I don't want to set expectations on fire. However, the video does show in that specific block that he goes in, made a phone call. You'll see 12 hours of guards going to basically check on him, come back. You'll see no one really comes out in that bay, in that area, than him. There's no one in there. When you combine that with the other evidence we will be releasing in the coming weeks, we're still finalizing some of the products. I think it's pretty clear. However, as I've clearly indicated in some of my tweets on my official account, listen, investigations, if new information surfaces in the future on any of these cases, we're always open. I'm just telling you, there's nothing there in the file at all that indicates anything other than, in fact.
Now, as you just heard, Dan Bongino made that statement that it was nobody on the block during the time of Epstein leaving and making that phone call and returning back to his jail cell, right? Well, you see other inmates in the video that's now released of this whole situation. So that would, make what Dan Bongino said false. You see a lot of people coming and going on that tier, right? Guard, you see a person with a hoodie on. Yes, that's right, a person with a hoodie on inside that facility, looking very suspicious. Who is this person? You see other inmates with orange jumpsuits on. They're walking around the tier. And it's very strange that Bongino said all this before the surveillance video was released of Epstein. Allegedly, it's supposed to be Epstein, but we can't see Epstein. So what video is Bongino talking about when he spoke of this before it was released? Because we don't see Epstein at all. Not a clear visual of him. But some people are pointing out it was the white grayish hair. Well, I can't see that. I'm not trying to see it, you guys. I want to see what Bongino seen. Because Bongino spoke so sure of himself that he's seen Epstein on the video. But we don't. Bongino would then go on to summarize the whole case and say, look, Jeffrey Epstein inflicted this self-harm on himself. And this is what, Bongino is claiming, that the FBI, the Trump administration, everybody came to agreement that this is what happened. Despite the findings of the FBI and the DOJ, Epstein's brother says, look, my brother was murdered. I don't care what nobody is saying, okay? And this was over a year ago where he did this interview telling, look, this is what he believed happened to his brother Giuffre. He was assassinated. It was a hit on his life, allegedly.
I Dr. Michael Barden to witness the autopsy. The autopsy was performed by the city pathologist. I, as a family member, have the right to have my own pathologist be there and to conduct an autopsy once the body is claimed, if we deemed it was necessary.
And the reason I ask you that is because you just said a second ago you thought that your brother's death was mourning his loss, but there seemed to be something to indicate to you, I want a second opinion to someone to observe the autopsy, right? What was the reason you thought that?
Well, because in speaking with his attorneys, they had a source, and they were sort of surprised that he did it. So we figured, let's cover the bases and make sure we have somebody there as well. Because one of the things that's not been out there much is that a few days after his death, there was a hearing scheduled to appeal the decision for bail. The first time when he was first arrested, his attorneys asked me if I would participate in his bail. And I said, yes. I said, put up my house in Florida. I knew my brother wasn't a flight risk, and he's my brother. I didn't care. And then bail was denied, which is why he was in jail. And then they were going to appeal the decision for bail. And Giuffre was putting up a pretty big bail. And they asked me for the appeal if I would guarantee his bail. And I agreed, in essence, doubling it. So there was a chance he might have gotten bail. And that hearing was scheduled in, I think, for the 12th, in a couple of days. So then I'm thinking, if he was going to kill himself, wouldn't he wait to after the bail hearing? Because if he got bail, he'd be living in his house with an ankle monitor and armed guards and cameras, so he wouldn't disappear anywhere. Not that I thought he would try. And then if bail was denied again, then it would be a more compelling argument for him to kill himself if he wanted to. But a few days before the bail hearing makes no sense at all.
So do you have a theory as to what happened here? Because, there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of conspiracy theories. There's a lot of innuendo. Do you have a theory as to what happened here?
Yes, my theory is that this was a targeted assassination.
So as you heard, Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, he had been saying almost over a year ago that he felt like and believed that his brother Jeffrey Epstein was assassinated at that Manhattan detention center there in New York. And that Giuffre couldn't have possibly did this to himself because, he was still fighting the case, trying to get another appeal for a bail hearing. And he could have possibly got it once his brother put up, his collateral. And why would he do this to himself right before even finding out if he would get a chance to go home? Now, this is where the death of Epstein comes in at. They're saying that Epstein was killed because he knew too much. He was a liability. He was blackmailing people. And he had tapes, videos of a lot of politicians and powerful, wealthy figures, these men that could have possibly been taken down along with Epstein. So to keep that from happening, let's just take out Epstein, right? And let's protect ourselves by doing this because Epstein was the one with this alleged evidence against him. Video files, right? All kinds of documentations. And, this right here was detrimental to a lot of people that was involved, or names could possibly be named, and even if they didn't have nothing to do with what Epstein was involved in, it was just a bad look. Just like Trump, okay, his name being caught up in the Epstein thing was scandalous, you guys. And Kash Patel, the FBI director who was appointed by Trump, he was talking as if they were trying to protect Epstein, and he wasn't going for that. And, this was back in 2023 where he was saying, they were going to come in and basically do all this and all that to try to expose what was going on.
Why is the FBI protecting the greatest, the largest scale in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list. You don't think that Bill Gates is lobbying Congress night and day to prevent the disclosure of that list? And why is it that the Senate, and good for Senator Blackburn to try to get it out, but then Dick Durbin comes over the top and says, no, we're not going to release the names. I don't care about the list itself, but release the names, right?
Now, Patel would even mention Bill Gates lobbying against the Epstein files coming out. And it was evidence of blackmailing because Epstein allegedly, would go on to try to blackmail Bill Gates about an affair he was having, an extramarital affair. And this was evidence that Epstein was trying to blackmail one of the richest men in the world at the time. And then in 2025, once he became the FBI director, he changed his tune, saying that it wasn't nothing there to be found as far as evidence of Jeffrey Epstein blackmailing people and doing all these illegal things to maintain his power. Well, what about the other powerful men that were possibly allegedly on those tapes, like Trump? Was he just there being a good friend and laughing and giggling and having a good old time with his buddy Epstein at the time when they were associates? Or was it something, deeper than that? Because many pointed out that why would Patel turn around and say, look, this is what happened. Epstein took himself out, and we would not participate in hiding any information about these grotesque activities that Epstein participated in. Well, why was Bill Gates trying to lobby against these files coming out, Patel? Was it just because he was having an extramarital affair? I don't believe that's mainly the reason. I believe it was more than that. And I believe it was more than just Gates lobbying against those files. This would lead up to the government covering up, what happened to Epstein if he was indeed assassinated, to keep him quiet. Because the simple fact that powerful men like Bill Gates and Trump couldn't afford the CST allegations pending with Jeffrey Epstein.
And I've said it, Dan Bongino said it, we've reviewed all the information and the American public is going to get as much as we can release. He killed himself. Do you think, let's play out the logical conclusion of this. Do you think that myself, Bongino, and others would participate in hiding information about Epstein's grotesque activities? Or do you think we would also participate in not prosecuting people we had evidence to prosecute people on? Where's the videotape of an Epstein Island of X, Y, and Z committing these frauds? Why haven't you given it to us? Do you really think I wouldn't give that to you if it existed?
Now, the feud between Trump and Musk, it kicked off the reignition of them releasing more information, even though they said that they would release more information on Epstein, as Bongino said, right? A month before the information was released. But right before that, Musk comes out. Him and Trump has a beef. And Musk says, look, the reason that those files on Epstein haven't all been put out there in totality is because President Donald Trump is in those files. Simple and plain. And that was a bombshell during the back and forth between Trump and Musk fallout that they had between each other. And then that's when the DOJ comes back and they release, the evidence saying that they concluded that they had no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein blackmailed powerful figures or kept a client list or was murdered in that detention center, right? And this was done in a memo. Well, a lot of people were real skeptical about that.
And you're going to get the video of the cell and you're going to see for yourself. And we will never be able to convince everyone. There's just no way that you could have run an op and had people go into that cell and not have any video of it and not have any people come out and say, hey, yeah, I saw that guy. He shouldn't have been there, the guard or this guy. There's just no access points into places like this in the detention center he was in. If they had gotten into the cell, you would see it.
But we were told that the cameras were down.
Well, I don't know who said that.
But that was in the news.
Now, what's absurd is that Patel didn't even know that the cameras wasn't working on that tier that were facing Jeffrey Epstein's cell. Yeah, they were streaming, but they wasn't recording. And Patel acted as if he had no idea, no information on that, but Rogan did. Because yes, they did come out publicly and say that the cameras were not working on that day when Epstein did this heinous act to himself. Now, all of this matters because the findings represent the first time Trump's administration has officially contradicted conspiracy theories about Epstein's activities and his death. Theories that had been pushed by the FBI's two top officials before Trump appointed them to the bureau. And that's Bongino, and that would also be Patel. And this right here was very telling because the administration was said to be releasing the video both raw and enhanced versions. And we come to find out in the enhanced version, they edited the video, right, of Jeffrey Epstein at that jail facility. And we know this because it was evidence of video editing software left on the screen of the actual surveillance video up until the point where it was edited, and after that it goes away and goes back to the raw version of this video. And not to mention the 1 minute and a couple of seconds that's actually edited out and missing in that video surveillance. Now, when Patel was pressed by one of those senators at that meeting there, the senator wanted to know, look, did Epstein do this to himself or was he murdered? Right? Then Patel would go on to say, well, I believed he did this to himself. Well, do you believe or do you know for a fact, Patel?
But in recent months, FBI Director Kash Patel has testified that Jeffrey Epstein took his own life.
Did Jeffrey Epstein hang himself or did somebody kill him?
Senator, I believe he hung himself in a cell in the Metropolitan Detention Center.
Are you going to release all the information about that?
Senator, we are working through that right now with the Department of Justice.
When do you think you'll have it done, Cash?
I think in the near future, sir.
Like before I die?
Senator, we've been working on that, and we're doing it in a way that protects victims and also doesn't put out into the ether information that is irrelevant for production of the public, such as CSAM.
And when Director Patel says CSAM, he means material.
Now, after that statement, Kash Patel, the FBI director, and Dan Bongino, the FBI deputy, they received a lot of backlash, saying that they were covering up for the Trump administration and what was going on between Trump and those Epstein files.
Kash Patel and Dan Bongino portray MAGA. Kash Patel lies about Epstein and Trump cover-up. Kash Patel covers up Epstein tapes on Rogan.
Now, this wasn't Epstein's first time being accused of these allegations, because back in 2008, when he was arrested, but he was given a secret plea deal to where he wouldn't do no time, and it was a deal that was done by Acosta, right? One of these government officials that did this deal with Epstein to where he wouldn't do no jail time. All he had to do was plead to the prostitution charges, and that's it. But what about the abuse? What about the kids? Wow, this was a huge cover-up already that was in full effect back in 2008, and Acosta was a part of that.
But it also comes back to the point of only two people allegedly, or two people were brought to justice for his crimes, and he was arrested the first time for being engaged in prostitution.
Now, though the report faulted Acosta for his judgment, it concluded that his actions in arranging the deal did not constitute misconduct, and that none of the prosecutors involved committed misconduct in their interactions with the victims. Now, Epstein might have thought he got off easy back in 2008 with that sweetheart deal that he didn't have to plead guilty for those CST allegations, and all he had to do was plead to the lesser charges. Kind of sounds like what the outcome in Diddy trial was, right? And then you had Epstein. He was later charged by federal prosecutors in Manhattan for nearly identical allegations in 2019, years later. But he took his own life while in federal custody as he awaited trial. Acosta said that the Epstein affair was vastly more lurid and sweeping than when he was first involved, and an allusion to some of the high-profile names referenced in media reports as friends or associates of Epstein, and the fact that more evidence has now been assembled as additional victims have come forward. Now, most of those Epstein documents over the past several years have come out of civil litigation between one of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Giuffre, and his former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell. And Ghislaine Maxwell lost her appeal last year against her own ST conviction for helping Epstein, young girl. But it's important to know that Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't even involved in that 2008 case of Jeffrey Epstein when he pleaded to that lesser charge of prostitution. No, she didn't become accountable until after, years later, when Epstein was accused in 2019. Okay, now that's when Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of her role And it started to come out, more and more clear that, look, she was more involved than people thought. She was even partaking in some of those grotesque activities with Epstein and those minors.
Ghislaine Maxwell was involved in prostitution. So where are the third parties that were with these victims, and who are they? So the other thing I think they're concerned about is if they bring one or two people to justice, they're going to open up they're going to break the dam, and then there's going to be a public outcry that everybody must go.
Now, that's a good question. Who are the third parties that were involved in these activities? Because information came out, evidence in the trial that one of the victims said Epstein had showed her that his whole mansion was wired up with video cameras, 40 rooms, and a surveillance room looking at all the rooms and monitoring them in his house. He had these bodyguards, these goons. Yeah, that's right. Goons is what they called them, to oversee this. So who was Epstein monitoring in these 40 rooms in his mansion if it was just him and Ghislaine Maxwell partaking in these activities with these minors? That doesn't sound logical, because it had to be other people that he was monitoring in those rooms with those minors, if you ask me, you guys. And they have all the tapes. That's right, the FBI, they have all those tapes. They probably reviewed those tapes. And from what they're saying now, this is, material that can't be released to the public because it involves children. Well, what about the people who are on the videotape abusing those children? Are y'all telling us that nobody else but just Epstein and Maxwell are on those tapes? What about those bodyguards? Why weren't they co-conspirators? They were watching over this surveillance room, watching the activities that were going on in those 40 rooms there at Epstein's mansion. Why wasn't they called to testify? Okay, I mean, this is all very detailing of a cover-up. Ghislaine Maxwell will go on to be prosecuted and convicted and receive 20 years for her role in the Epstein case.
Ghislaine Maxwell will be almost 80 before she feels freedom again. As for prosecutors, it is unclear who is next in their sights.
There were other co-conspirators that helped this, scheme go on for many, many years. So we'll wait to see if the government takes action with them.
And you'd like to see that pursued?
Of course, of course.
This saga is far from over because the and his accomplice did not act alone.
But perhaps the biggest bombshell, investigators say they found no incriminating client list of Epstein's, no credible evidence that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals, and no evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties.
Now, I told you, you'll get a deep understanding once you look at all these findings that I'm presenting. And you see why they came up with, no evidence was found that he blackmailed or had third parties involved with him in this ongoing scheme to keep him in power to abuse these minors. Look, all of that is cap.
And yes, there is a huge volume of information that has not been released to the public. For example, the 302s of when the FBI interviewed victims. Those are generally not released to the public. And so there is information that is out there. But whether or not, as you say, it contains these bombshells. And I think it's also really important, today. Why was it today? This information is in some cases decades old. The DOJ has had access to this information for a very long time. And no one today that I talked to could give me a clear reason about why this happened today, with the exception of one very senior Department of Justice official who said that they perceived the purpose and the timing of this as a distraction from other matters. And I think that is a very, very telling statement.
Now, as you heard, she said that there's evidence. She was told that the release of these Epstein files was a distraction. That's why they were doing it now. Wow. So is that why they did it in phases? To distract here, distract there, and distract again? Maybe so, because She just told us the rundown on why this was happening.
Alex Costa, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape?
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
Now, in an interview that the FBI deputy Dan Bongino did, he stated that the American people were lied to about COVID-19 when the Biden administration was in office. That's right. He stated that, yeah, it was definitely lies being told about COVID-19 and they were going to expose it, meaning the Trump administration was. So how do we not know that the murder of Epstein wasn't, lied about by the Trump administration? Because clearly, if they lied to the American public about COVID-19 and the severity of that whole issue, how do we, make sure that Trump's administration is not, lying, right, about the whole situation with Epstein and his mysterious death?
Origins, are we going to find out information that the government lied to us?
Damn right you are. We're all over that. The minute I got in there in that job, I said, hey,
they
get everybody
purposely
in here.
lied to the American people. They purposely lied to us.
Yeah, listen, that's the one I'm the most optimistic about. I was pretty clear on my social media account that I ordered that case immediately to be looked into again. We have a great investigator on it, and I think we should see action on that one shortly.
And for the DOJ to say that, look, there were no third parties involved in any type of wrongdoing that were connected to Epstein's crimes. Well, what about the victims that came forward in Ghislaine Maxwell's case, and they testified against her? Those victims didn't name any other people who they seen at the time or that they knew at the time of these crimes going on that were connected to Epstein. No other people, huh? Well, they got interviewed by the FBI. So what I'm thinking is there are other people. These people are powerful men, and the government just does not want to out them, allegedly, in my opinion. Now, the report put out by the FBI Digital Forensic Analysis Unit in Quantico, Virginia, didn't help the situation at all when it came to those surveillance videos that were supposed to be watching Jeffrey Epstein's cell. They put out a report saying they received MCC New York's DVR system on August 16, 2019, and that's 6 days after the incident with Epstein, and they began to conduct a forensic analysis on the system. According to FBI forensic reports, DVR2 did not start successfully. I wonder why. And the Digital Forensics Analysis Unit found that the system contained 3 faulty hard drives. And keep in mind, this was going on way before Epstein did this to himself, allegedly. And they said that the FBI forensic reports state that 3 drives were repaired by FBI advanced data recovery specialists, but the DVR was never able to be assembled successfully. The forensic reports further state that an FBI computer scientist and the company one technician reviewed the DVR2 controller logs and found that there had been previously catastrophic disk failures and no recordings would have been available after July 29th, 2019. And this is, like I said, before the situation with Epstein there at that detention center. Now, in the surveillance video that was released, alleged Epstein could be seen walking, being accompanied by officers back to his cell around 7:49, 7:50 p.m. And they stated that all inmates were locked in their cells by 8 p.m. But at approximately 6:45 p.m. before all that, Epstein leaves the attorney conference room. And at approximately 7 p.m., contrary to BOP policy, but with the permission of a unit manager, Epstein is permitted to place an unmonitored phone call to a number with a New York City area code, purportedly to speak with his mother. In actuality, Epstein speaks with someone whom he allegedly had a personal relationship, and they don't say who, but they know who. After the call, Epstein is returned to his cell, where he remains without a cellmate. Now, the officers there, the guards, They were supposed to do 30-minute rounds within the MCC New York SHU, and the indictment further alleged that Noel and Thomas created, those are the guards, certified and submitted false documentation indicating that the counts and rounds had been done as required to conceal their failure to perform their assigned duties. As a result, it appeared that from documentation that prisoners in the SHU, including Epstein, were being regularly monitored. In fact, no CO had checked on Epstein from approximately 10:40 p.m. on August 9, 2019 until approximately 6:30 a.m. on August 10, 2019, when Epstein was found hanging in his cell. And in fact, through review and analysis of the SHU video footage, witness statements, and BOP records, the OIG determined that approximately 10:40 p.m., a CO believed to be Noel carried linen or inmate clothing up to the L tier, which was the last time any CO approached the only entrance to the SHU tier in which Epstein was housed. Now, it doesn't say who she carried the linen or inmate clothing up to in that tier, but did she provide extra linen and clothing to Epstein to basically use to hang himself? Maybe so. Maybe she was unaware that that's what she was doing, but excessive linen and clothing was found in Epstein's jail cell. But wait, there's more. They come back and contradict themselves when the FBI puts out this statement in this conclusion, this final analysis of what happened, saying that Epstein died by UAI, if you know what I mean, and further supported by video footage from the common area of the Special Housing Unit, SHU, where Epstein was housed at the time of his death. As DOJ Inspector General explained that in 2023, anyone entering or attempting to enter the tier where Epstein's cell was located from the SHU common area would have been captured on this footage. The FBI independent review of this footage confirmed that from the time Epstein was locked in his cell around 10:40 p.m. Hold on, you said that all the inmates were locked in their cells by 8 p.m. and that Epstein had went to use the phone around 6:45 to the 7:49, 7:50 mark. That was Epstein being led back up to his cell by officers. So what happened? Why is the FBI now concluding that Epstein was the one that around 10:40 was seen on that footage headed back to his cell to be locked up, when they said Noel was the one that was believed to be seen going up to the tier to drop off extra linen and clothing? So which one was it? Was it Epstein or Noel, the officer on video? I'm confused. Then they stated that Epstein stayed in his cell until 6:30 a.m. until somebody found him the next morning, and nobody had entered any of the tiers in the SHU up until that point. Wow. But as we see on the surveillance video, that's a lie. We see many people coming and going through that SHU, and like I said earlier, a hooded individual was also on that footage. And many people said, well, hoods aren't allowed to be worn in that facility, which I believe could very well be true. Now, they also concluded this review with the FBI enhanced the relevant footage by increasing its contrast, balancing the color, and improving its sharpness for greater clarity and viewability. The full, raw, and enhanced videos are available online as well, and many are pointing out that even though it's two versions available online, both of those versions have a minute missing from them at the same mark, around the 11:58 to 12 o'clock mark. Okay, so this right here lets us know that during that time of midnight, from 11:58 in a couple of seconds to 12 o'clock midnight, both of these videos are missing that footage. What happened between that time? Who was going and coming between that time? Because that could very well explain what happened to Epstein. Now, as if Jeffrey Epstein's death wasn't suspicious enough, one of the accusers, Virginia Giuffre, who had won a sexual assault lawsuit against Prince Andrew in 2022, was found dead at her home in Western Australia on April 25th. And her came less than a month after she posted on Instagram that she had been in a road accident and had 4 days to live due to kidney renal failure. So she took her own life even though she only had 4 days to live? Doesn't sound logical, right? If you're going to die naturally, why take your own life? Now, they say that Virginia was going through a ongoing custody battle with her ex-husband with these 3 kids they had together. Obviously, he had the kids and she was trying to get them back or something to that effect. And if she had just won this lawsuit, right, in 2022 against Prince Andrew for an undisclosed amount of money, why couldn't she get her kids back? She had all this money now, right? So it was something there that was very suspicious that was going on leading up to her death. But in my findings, in my research that I just concluded with you guys on this Epstein case, it seems like this whole case of Epstein was very much covered up and suspicious and mysterious in its own way, because now we have a situation where they're saying, look, nothing was found, no evidence of co-conspirators, no bribery, no blackmail was done, right? Only Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and maybe Prince Andrew, right, who settled out of court with Virginia Giuffre, were probably the only ones who had the finger pointed at them. But as we know, Prince Andrew didn't do any time, right? He just paid off that lawsuit with Virginia. Then all of a sudden, she ended up dead years later. Wow. As in all these cases of Unanswered, if you follow me, they're very vague because they said that Virginia did this to herself at her farm out there in Australia, okay? Now, was she by herself? Was it other people there? I mean, they don't go into detail when stuff like this occurs. And this is always a problem, right? Because we are left in the dark, we're left in suspense as to what happened. And that's how conspiracy theories start forming, you guys. How did Virginia Giuffre do this to herself? They never even explained that. So we still have so many unanswered questions, you guys. But all they told us is back in April of this year, 2025, she was found unalive. Between 12 million and 16.5 million is what, some reported that she could have possibly gained from that lawsuit with Prince Andrews. And even the Queen donated $2 million more to her charity on fighting CST, if you know what I mean. Now, that alone should tell us a lot. What happened to all that money after Virginia apparently, allegedly, offed herself? Did it go to her kids? Did it go to her husband? Who knows? That wasn't disclosed neither. But they did tell us who was present when Epstein allegedly took himself out. Those guards, Noel, Thomas, and all the rest of them that we seen on surveillance camera that wasn't accounted for in the documentation. They know if somebody came in there in that tier, right, did something to Epstein or not. Why weren't they questioned thoroughly, right? Or maybe they were, and this is how the cover-up works. Nobody's talking. So y'all get in the comment section, and y'all let me know what y'all think about this entire situation. And until the next time, this is OG Jucario TV with the latest in rap, hip-hop, celebrity, and urban news. You're watching the Rundown Podcast. I appreciate everybody for spending with me. I appreciate all my subscribers for sliding with your boy every time. And say, man, hey, man, keep hitting that like button, keep hitting that subscribe button, and look, turn on post notification so we can slide whenever I get the drop. You already know what it is, man. It's deeper than Buddha, you hear me? And guess what? I'm gone.